American Transcendentalism. Transcendentalism was a literary movement in the 1820 to 1860 time period that established the clear American voice. It's part of the Romantic literary movement, and this time is referred to as the American Renaissance. Transcendentalism dominated American thought prior to the Civil War. Transcendentalism is the idea that a person can transcend or rise up to a higher spiritual level. To transcend, a person had to seek the spiritual, not the material, greatness. This time period was very eclectic and varied, and there's lots of different types of literature going on simultaneously. Transcendentalists wanted people to perceive the truth through their senses, to find a higher reasoning, but the truth they believed did not have to be taught. It was innate within us to know the truth. Transcendentalists often speak out against what they perceive to be unfair or unjust. So if you think about Transcendentalism and you go to your American history classes, and you can see how these ideas, the importance of the individual and creating the path of the individual, of whatever the individual wants to do, this is a very radical movement. Quite different from what was going on in Europe, where they still inherited jobs from their parents at this point. But America was where you could be anything you wanted to be. And Transcendentalism, that philosophy, is really the core behind why we have embraced that philosophy. So there are some famous transcendental authors: Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, and Elizabeth Peabody. I'm going to talk mostly about Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau. So here's a chart. Their basic beliefs, and then some quotes that substantiate these. The belief in nonconformity or in individualism. So the explanation here is doing what you think is right, listening to your own thoughts, and by doing so you can discover the purpose for being here, as long as you are independent and true to yourself. So a quote here that makes sense: march to the beat of your own drummer. Self-Reliance. Do things on your own. Do not expect people to do things for you. So trust thyself. Free thought. This is an idea that's contained that has to do with religion. Divinity is self-contained, so there's no need for organized religion. You can get closer to God by going through yourself, not another person such as a priest. So those who think different are the greatest. This is very radical. This is kind of this is, of course, post the Reformation, but it's even breaking within Reformation. So breaking from the idea of a huge organized religion to a more personal approach to religion, having that personal relationship with God kind of idea. So the idea that you can think within yourself and commune with God directly, that's something that's coming out not just in religion, but also in expression and through nature, our natural forests, the lakes, the rivers, and looking at that beauty. This idea kind of aligns with Romanticism, with the very long descriptions of beautiful landscapes and things like that. So you can now see where some of these ideas are merging. Confidence or belief in yourself. You cannot transcend or rise above if you do not believe in yourself. And this is very core American value. We're always encouraging children, what do you want to do, and how they can build on their strengths so that they can achieve their goals. This is something that is highly American, and at the time period, this was absolutely revolutionary. The importance of nature. You can find yourself in nature. So if you think about men and nature being one, that it's not the idea now so much that what can man do to conquer nature? It's now what can man do to coexist with nature? And the idea that nature is simple, and just by observing nature and seeing nature, things can become more clear. So now you kind of can see how Transcendentalism is kind of linking to the sciences, to naturalism, that whole idea that Darwin had of just observing different species and observing specific characteristics of different species. So we're seeing lots of ideas merge together, which is pretty exciting. The idea that we want to simplify. We don't want to strive for a whole lot of material wealth. We just want to be happy. We want to have a whole life, not necessarily a Spartan life where we have absolutely nothing. We don't need a life that's full of huge materialistic items. So you can now see kind of like that Puritan idea where we don't want ornate things. It also kind of overlaps with the hippie movement in the 1960s and 70s, and seems to also align with a lot of millennial thoughts about enjoying the experiences as opposed to amassing the possessions. It was an optimistic point of view. Unhappiness was just an illusion. You had to refute evil. Humans are good, but they can easily be corrupted. But it's something that is innately good about humans. And that's an optimism that we weren't seeing in the Puritan time when everything was hellfire and brimstone. There's intuition, or called a priori knowledge, and that's where you listen to your inner voice, and your inner voice tells you and it guides you on what's right and what's wrong. And in Transcendentalism, the idea was this was a true innate ability that everyone was born with, and if everyone just listened to their inner voice, then people would come to the right and the moral decisions. And it was also about nonviolent disobedience. So you do also see political things going on here. If you think about America and the revolution, and America began saying, we no longer want to be part of England. We want to be our own state. And then we had, Washington have his 2 terms, his 8-year presidency. And then he said, okay, that's it. That's all I want to do. And there was a peaceful transfer of power. And we have maintained that in every presidential election since then, even ones where, people are highly vocal about who they like and they don't like. The country does not go into revolution because of an opposition party candidate being elected. People might not like it, but we respect the institution. And then you, of course, get down to like nonviolent disobedience. So you have ideas here of, I'm going to make a protest against the government, but I'm not going to bring it to battle. I want to discuss these ideas. I want to make change. And now you're seeing kind of how American democracy is developing too. So this was a huge, huge part of American history, and also why it's called the American Renaissance. It's a whole new way of doing things on many, many levels that all intertwine. Nature and self-reliance. So Emerson first expressed his philosophy and the essay Nature. It's a belief that a higher reality achieved by human reasoning. So we can come to our fuller selves, our better selves, by our own reasoning that was given to us by God. It suggests that every individual is capable of discovering this higher truth through intuition. So, for example, in Self-Reliance, you have the quotes, "There is a time in every man's education when he arrives at the conviction that envy is ignorance, that imitation and suicide. And trust thyself. What I must do is all that concerns me, not what people think." So you're seeing that individual really coming to light, and that the importance of the individual is coming up. And this is, again, revolutionary. To be great is to be misunderstood. Henry David Thoreau wrote an essay called Civil Disobedience, and it urges passive, nonviolent resistance to government policies to which an individual is morally opposed. This is really important because this is dialogue. When Thoreau wrote Civil Disobedience, he didn't write it as an ending. He wrote it as a beginning. This is something that we need to have a dialogue about what's right and what's wrong. Don't forget that why we left England, and let's not be in chaos over it. Let's talk about what problems we have and how we can not have these in the future. For example, if injustice is of such nature that it requires you to be the agent of injustice to another, then I say break the law. Let your life be the friction to stop the machine. So, for example, in philosophy, there's often a thought, is it wrong to steal? And everyone says yes. And then, is it wrong to steal bread if your children are starving? And then you have to think, well, not really. So in this quote, what Thoreau is saying is it's not just obeying a law because it's what the law says. You have to be able to think through the law and determine if that law is still correct. Now, people would say it's not right to steal. And people say, yeah. However, when someone steals because they need something, you can kind of see, oh, what other issues are going on here? And so now you're opening up dialogue to talk about charity and ways that we can help people who might be in that position. This essay influenced people like Gandhi, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and even Cesar Chavez.